So as it gets dark. Oh, there he is.
G'day, how you going?
Good. All the much better for seeing you.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, look, forgive me, what was your name again?
Sophie. My real name is Sophie.
No, Charles.
That's all right. People call me Lord, Charles.
Lord. Okay. I won't go with that. I think I prefer Sophie for you, but I could go with Lord perhaps. We'll try Sophie for now. Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yes. Yeah, good to be here. And let me now look. I've got some problems with my eyesight. That's why I wear glasses. So I'm trying to see if we've got a few people on, because what I'll just say to those people watching, you might want to get as many people around seeing this as possible.
Yeah, if you can send off the little arrow to people who are online, that would be great. Yeah.
Especially if you care about Australia, because, you know, why haven't we heard about Australia's deadliest medical scandal? Why haven't we heard anything about it? So, you know, whenever you're ready, Sophie, we can get stuck in. But, yeah, it's just a question I have for anyone watching. Ask yourself that question. You know, do we have anyone out there that's a bit of a Perry Mason or a Sherlock Holmes? Because go and have a look on the internet and see any listing. See if you can find the number of people, or number of casualties of the contaminated blood scandal in Australia. You won't find it anywhere. And here's our deadliest medical scandal, and yet you won't see it listed anywhere. And so I'll go into the, you know, whenever you're ready, Sophie, I'll answer the questions. But that's what I'm saying to people. There's a reason you won't find it anywhere. And perhaps tonight, if you're listening, you'll find out the big secret as to why you'll not see Australia's deadliest medical scandal listed anywhere.
For me, that's you know, part of the reason of getting you on, because I think that what this pandemic has done is expose a number of cover-ups that have occurred in the past in Australia that people know nothing about, right? And certainly I knew of the Australian Red Cross scandal, but I didn't know about the massive CSL cover-up that was part of that. My whole thing in Australia is that they always do this kind of burst the pustule thing, where they do like a mainstream media coverage of it, but they'll only ever scrape the surface and they'll never go underneath and find out what's really got on. So the public basically believes it's been dealt with, believes it's been exposed, but the actual thing itself and that's the same thing with the Royal Commission, in a sense, into institutionalised child abuse, right? Is it exposed the top layer of stuff, but there's so much other stuff being kept undercover underneath, you know. And I guess what I've seen this pandemic as an opportunity to do is that more and more people actually find out and go off and do their own research about things that have been covered up in Australian history, and we can start exposing them. I think it's like a time that we can start exposing them.
Well, Sophie, that was a really great way of putting it when you're talking about, you know, how these, say, for example, child sex abuse, the Royal Commission, the perception of the public would be, oh, okay, it's being handled. And to some extent, it is being addressed, right, to some extent. But we're talking about a monumental crime, you know, a monumental issue. And what happens is, the danger with these things is that because we think, oh, right, it's being handled, we then turn away and
forget about it. Yeah,
been addressed, and it hasn't been. And then, you know, you mentioned earlier about the Red Cross scandal, and we're now hearing about the CSL scandal. But, you know, Sophie, again, another great example is the Red Cross scandal. I don't think your viewers know that the Red Cross are actually Australia's biggest killers. In terms of medical killers. No one comes close. And this is a supposedly humanitarian organisation, right? Well, let me tell you something. How humanitarian is it to cover up knowingly distributing contaminated blood to children? Okay, and those children and their parents losing that child losing their life, and decades later, they're still covering that up. And do you know how they do it? How the Red Cross does it? They do it. They never ever talk about tainted blood, of course. There's never any listing anywhere, so they won't allow any listing anywhere. But if they are ever pushed on it, it's all played as part of the whole tragedy of the AIDS issue, right?
Mm.
And it was all one great big unavoidable accident. Well, that's why I'm saying to anyone watching tonight, get ready. Get ready. Because I ask you this question. If you knew that a family member of yours was murdered, the guy came into your house tonight and murdered one of your loved ones, what would you do about it? Well, what would you do about it if you knew that it happened not once, but twice, but thrice, but tens of times, but hundreds of times, but thousands of times? Because we can prove it. Oh yeah, we can prove it. You see, I don't get into the business of making claims without the proof, categoric proof that the Red
never.
Now we're getting into the history now, okay, and it's a good segue to do that, which is that how many of the people knew out there, for example, knew that in Australia we have a blood supply, and that blood supply does things like collects blood from excellent, wonderful blood donors. Please continue to donate blood. Blood donors are heroes. And then what happens is the Red Cross collects that blood, supposedly screens the blood to make sure it's safe, and then distributes that blood, okay? Well, really you could say this, that before the mid-1990s, Australia's blood supply was left unprotected from hepatitis and hepatitis C. And this was happening thousands and thousands of times that this virus was being transmitted over decades. And the Red Cross, and I'm telling the audience now, the Australian Red Cross Blood Service knew that their blood was transmitting hepatitis C for decades. For decades. There are tens of thousands of victims out there. There are people out there that don't know they've got hepatitis C. This thing is eating away at their liver. We've got people all the time in our group who are fighting liver cancer as a consequence of having acquired hepatitis C. So here they are in the 1980s or in the 1970s. You've had elective surgery. You've been in a car accident. You might have had a baby. You've just received maybe one blood transfusion. You didn't receive maybe 50, just one. And years later, you're feeling sick. Well, now there are thousands of Australians who are feeling sick and they don't know why, but they're about to find out. And they're about to find something that the Red Cross hasn't been telling them. So to sum it up, the history that we have is the Red Cross is covering up Australia's biggest medical scandal. It's the biggest because no one's been more affected. There are no single incident has affected more patients than this Red Cross tainted blood scandal, okay?
So that's Charles. When do you think there was a point that stopped, or there still is that risk with taking a blood transfusion?
Okay, well, I actually think in terms of the risk of blood transfusion, the main risk of blood transfusion was you could say was HIV and hepatitis C, and you could say that risk really was brought to an end by the late 90s, by about the year 2000. In Australia, there was a case of HIV through a blood transfusion in 99. Okay, that was the last case of HIV, but that was a rare case. And you could say that it is, for all intents and purposes, safe. But I just want to say this. I want to say that with a caveat. I don't want to scare anybody or any of that nonsense. The blood supply is, for all intents and purposes, safe. I've got no reason to suspect otherwise. So please be confident. We're talking about what happened before the year 2000. We're talking about the fact that you might have had a blood transfusion before the mid-1990s, or someone you care about. And if so, you might want to consider getting tested for hepatitis C, because there are tens of thousands of Australians, even more possibly. That's another thing tonight. How do we know? They say there are hundreds of thousands of people with hepatitis C in Australia. How did they get it? How did hepatitis C arrive in Australia?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, you see, so this is what we're about to find out as this scandal unfolds, because this is a massive scandal, and then you've got the other side of the scandal.
We didn't have like massive intravenous drug using population here.
Well, we have had a massive, we have had a significant intravenous drug using population, but the question is, how did they get it?
Yeah, how'd they get it?
Yeah, well,
question about the virus, really, doesn't it?
Okay, well, here we go. Here we go. Get ready, everyone. I hope you keep watching and stick with us, because let me tell you, we're going to go roughly around how hepatitis C got here, okay? And this is how it got here.
Interesting.
Authorities would like you to believe that hepatitis C, which affects hundreds of thousands of Australians still today, And, you know, it can lead to liver cancer over years, right, if untreated. So authorities would have you believe that, you know, it happened and exploded because of intravenous drug use and the sharing of needles. That's how it got here. But they don't talk about their role in it. Well, of course, their role is they're the architects. They're the buffoons, the fools, and they're always the people that really with their hand on the wheel, and they're drunk, perpetually drunk. What they did, of course, was it all began in the second, sort of with the origins of blood transfusions in the 1940s. They did things like they decided to collect blood from prisoners. So they used to send Red Cross blood vans in the 50s to Australian jails, and you get people in terrible shape, these convicts, who'd been offered inducements to donate blood. And, you know, there'd be no suggestion or questions about, you know, their health history. They would just take it from these prisoners. And they knew that hepatitis was happening in the blood supply for decades, and they kept on taking it from Australian prisoners. And then in the 1970s, in the early 70s, the Canadian Red Cross actually stopped in Canada collecting blood from prisoners because they knew they couldn't get away with it any longer. And they knew that if they kept on going, they'd probably end up in jail. Well, guess what? The Red Cross here, they kept on collecting from prisoners. But now we get into the other side of the scandal, and it goes like this. Why were they so hungry? They collect blood from anybody in this country, literally anybody they were collecting blood from. People that shouldn't donate blood, they were asking them to donate blood. So why would a humanitarian agency be collecting blood from literally anybody, including people that they knew to be infectious? Okay? Well, the reason they were doing it for decades was because the Red Cross is a fraud. The Red Cross is not your humanitarian agency. The Australian Red Cross Blood Service is a fraud. It is a shop front of Australia's largest business, CSL. The reality, the Red Cross is a business and it's a franchise. And as this relationship grew between the fraudulent humanitarian agency that is the Australian Red Cross, let me tell you why they do it this way. Would you really donate blood to a greedy, you know, pharmaceutical company like CSL, with whose executives make millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases for your blood? You know, thanks for your blood, by the way, and I'll just go and buy myself another private jet, guys. You wouldn't do it, right? So they have a CSL are essentially a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? And the sheep's clothing is the humanitarian Red Cross. Now, guys, if you think I'm sounding too dramatic, and if you think, you know, maybe I'm going too far, a lot of what I've said tonight, not my words, they're the words of CSL, the boss dog of the Red Cross. They're the words of their chair. And if you look on our Instagram page, you'll see that we've got his exact quotes about the Red Cross, their business partner, being a business and a franchise. And so
are they associated with the International Red Cross?
Oh, of course, there's links. Yeah. Coca-Cola.
But they're a franchise.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. They're a franchise in the sense that, let me explain. The Australian Red Cross Blood Service collects blood, and over the years it's collected blood, and that blood, some of that blood has gone off to CSL that's made into various products. Now, CSL gives the Red Cross money for that. So they collect blood and the money goes back to them, right? And their chair, the chair of Australia's biggest company, this blood products company, this vaccine developer, CSL, Brian McNamee, the chair himself has said, he's explained the relationship. He's explained that basically what happens is it's a great gig, because what happens is CSL get the blood, and I think they're worth about $140 billion right now. So it's been very good business. And they get the blood, and then what happens is they go give a kickback, they give money back to the Red Cross, and they get to go off and do what they want with it. Maybe there's some sort of project overseas. Maybe there's a conference in Zurich they want to go to. That's how the relation, maybe there's another 5-star accommodation they want to travel to for some other conference, some other private jet. That's how it all works. Hundreds of millions involved each year for the Australian Red Cross. And this is the cover-up.
Just recirculating.
Sorry?
Just recirculating between CSL.
Oh, it's recirculating. We're talking about billions of dollars, man. This is Australia's biggest business. This is CSL.
I know. When I heard you say that the other day, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Because, you know, we've all been so fixated on the big mining corporations and, you know, the media corporations. And then to find out that actually it's this pharmaceutical company that's Not surprisingly at the moment, the biggest company in Australia, but it was a shock, I have to say, when you said that.
Well, it's shock by design, Sophie, because Brian McNamee, the chair of CSL, has actually said the whole strategy is for CSL to stay beneath the radar. Now, anyway, guys, that quote is actually on our Instagram pictures or whatever you call it, where he's saying that's been the whole strategy. So, you know, it's a bit like the rise of China. China's been rising for decades, perhaps, and maybe we've been asleep while we've been playing with our smartphones, and we haven't looked at the humanitarian record as closely as we should have, right? And like with CSL, we haven't been looking at their record of their products. The record of their products goes like this. Okay, let me give you an analogy. If Ford Motor Cars made a motor car, CSL's record would be a 100% failure rate. So, you know, for example, with haemophiliacs in Australia, these are Australians who have the blood clotting disorder haemophilia, right? In the 1980s, again, this is an approximation because all of these things are shrouded in mystery, right?
Yeah, you can't even know how many people are impacted by it. That's
yeah,
right.
they don't want to advertise it because it, you know, it's a bit like MH. Now, look, without disrespect, what's that plane that went missing?
Oh, MH17.
Right, MH17. Right, okay. Well, let me tell you something. Not one plane went missing. Like plane after plane after plane after plane after plane with CSL written on the side went missing. And haemophiliacs, who are approximately maybe 2,400 of them in the country in the 1980s, were wiped out by CSL.
Yeah.
They were, you know, and people think that haemophiliacs actually were desperate for this blood, that they would have bled without it. Oh, no, they were persuaded in many cases. We've got people who are children, and the parents would come in. We've got this wonderful product made by CSL. Oh, come in. For goodness sake, come in. You need it. It's a great treatment. It's a wonderful treatment. Have it.
Yeah.
Of course, the bloody treatment transferred, you know, viruses. And in the 1980s, CSL wiped out the entire Australian haemophilia community. 1,750 victims, Australians, wiped out. 1,400 people have been dying over the decades, many of them my friends. And of course, no official listing. But why? Oh, because this is the biggest cover-up in Australian history by none. Where is there any other treatment in Australia that people would not have died without it? A lot of these people would not have died without these CSL factor VIII blood products. Where else is there a list of 1,400 Australians who've been killed by this treatment? And the next thing, you know, I just got to tell you this now. How does this fit into where we are now as we go through this situation with COVID-19? Well, this is my great fear. All of the hallmarks of what happened in Tainted Blood are happening again. And let me show you what they are. CSL were indemnified for these blood products that were given to children and others, haemophiliacs. And look where it got us. We indemnified them. They killed 1,400 Australians. And here we are. I was horrified to hear that this is happening again.
Yeah. Well, it's happening overseas, Charles, as you probably heard, that there's been thousands of deaths already from this Pfizer vaccine, which CSL is manufacturing here in Australia.
Well, actually, CSL are manufacturing
thousands of adverse reactions, you know, and we don't know down the track what's going to be the impact of that on people, you know, for something that they don't need. And it's the same thing with the haemophiliacs. It's like, we were talking about it the other night. The human body has this remarkable ability to reproduce its own blood, right? So with the right nutrition and the right vitamin support, then haemophiliacs can actually recover without blood transfusion. Is that not right?
Can I just say something, Sophie? I don't know if I necessarily agree or disagree with that, because can I just say something? That actually, that really takes us away from where I want to go tonight, which is on the haemophilia side. Haemophiliacs don't generally use blood products anymore, or the same kind. They use recombinant or artificial based. And that leads us into what happened here in the 80s in Australia. CSL, okay, let's talk about this company. CSL began in Australia in 1916 or so. Forgive me if I'm out by a year or two, but it's something like that. And their principal role was to make...
Oh, just explain that it was a Commonwealth company at that stage. Yes.
That's
so
right.
It was owned by the Australian people at that stage.
Right. And it had these fuddy-duddy scientists and a few military types, and their they're researching stuff for vaccines for our military, and they're making anti-venoms in case someone copped a brown snake bite or something. And they were doing that for decades. And really, they're a secretive, fuddy-duddy organisation, and they'd make stuff for veterinary science and so on. But they suddenly, in the 60s, had this approach. They were suddenly going to take this sort of corporatized approach. They'd start pretending like they're a private business, even though they're government owned. And you start seeing annual reports talking about, they've been cost cutting, and they've been, profits will be this and all the rest of it. It's weird. I mean, this is a government body, and they're behaving like they're, I don't know, Apple computers or something. But then something incredible happened. The POMs developed this, the English, they developed this blood product.
Sorry.
They developed this blood product, right, called Factor VIII. Factor VIII was a blood product that revolutionized the treatment for haemophilia. In many cases, it meant that haemophiliacs could be treated at home instead of having to spend lengthy times in hospital having blood transfusions or infusions. Okay, so what happens is that this revolutionary treatment, there's just one thing about it. Each sort of treatment bottle, if you will, is made up of thousands of donors. Okay, so if just one of those donors is infected with something like Hep C, who the Red Cross, who collected the blood in the 1970s and 80s, weren't even screening for, even though they knew it was there, they were doing nothing to limit it. Okay, so just one of those donors has got something, the batch is contaminated. Everyone gets it, right? So if these haemophiliacs were in big trouble with this Factor VIII product, if it became contaminated. So CSL, with all these fuddy-duddy scientists, in 1978 decide, guess what? The English have told us, we're going to make this Factor VIII product, and they start distributing it to Australian haemophilia community, and they start ringing up parents in the haemophilia clinics and saying, come on down, we've got this fantastic new product from England that CSL are making. Everybody come on down, bring all your children down, roll up. Kids would turn up at hospital with bruises. That's unsightly, have this CSL product. And what do you know? Boom, in the 1980s, bang, man, all those kids start getting sick. And it's the AIDS scandal, it's the hepatitis scandal, it's all the rest of it. People start dropping like flies, and parents start losing children, and the cover-up begins. Well. So CSL have gone and killed 1,400 people that you've never heard about, faceless people, yeah? All those aeroplanes with CSL on the side, which just disappeared, like that Malaysia flight just disappeared and covered up. And then guess what they did? And they pulled off the greatest scandal and the greatest swindle ever in Australian history. They privatised. In 1994, they privatised, totally indemnified. So the government basically says, listen, guys, no one can sue you. Go off over the horizon. They
hid behind the corporate veil, basically.
Yeah. Take hundreds of millions of dollars worth of our assets that the mugs, the Australian taxpayer paid for. Off you go. And by the way, we won't ever want to have an investigation into anything that you did. We won't ever want to listen to the victims, because if we do, we're the ones who are liable because we've indemnified you. And so the foundations for the greatest scandal in Australian history was set. It's got to be criminal. It's just got to be. But we know.
Yes. Who was the Prime Minister at the time they privatised? Do you remember?
When were they privatised? They privatised in 1994.
So that's John Howard?
No, we're going back. I think that was Paul
Keating. It was Keating. Yeah. Oh, that'd make sense.
Right, but the thing is, right, is that they privatised them, but these guys did not even warn those haemophiliacs, the haemophilia community, that they knew there'd been the AIDS contamination of the 80s, but in the 90s, they didn't even warn that same community. Oh, by the way, it's happened again. There's a hepatitis C contamination. And they often suffer. 100% of the people that used their product in the early 90s had not been told that, by the way, guys, you've got Hep C. So these CSL guys, they've got doctors at CSL, they're in the back room privatising, packing the suitcases in a hurry, shredding things, quickly privatise us. Quick, we've got to get to America to have our new lives in California. Quickly, I've got another Bentley to buy. And they're doing all this sort of gear. But did they tell the haemophiliacs? Of course not. If they told the haemophiliacs, they couldn't have made their getaway into privatisation.
Yeah,
And
because
so,
they would have been
oh,
held liable. That's right. Yeah.
and no one knows about this. No one knows
Disgusting.
about it.
So
Yep.
disgusting.
And so now, guess what? CSL are the manufacturers, actually. I heard you say Pfizer before. Well, unless I'm mistaken, at this stage, they're actually the manufacturer of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which
right.
is the British-based vaccine. Now, look, I've been heavily censored, and in fact, Facebook recently basically shadow banned me and deleted me for talking about CSL having given people AIDS and hepatitis C. And they factually did. They killed 1,400 people. But whenever I talk about the vaccine business, they censor me, okay? This is what
it's a no-no word unless you're in mainstream media at the moment.
okay. Us bad boys, CSL victims and others, we can't say it. But I just want to say that
you're not allowed to say it.
I just want to say this. I know it's the equivalent to swearing. It's like a religion. Oh, it's sacrilege. But I just want to say this. Look, whatever people's feelings are on dealing with COVID-19, I really do think that we need to be protected by the law. We need to be protected by the law. And when these manufacturers make a product that we take to protect us against something like COVID-19, they're required by law to have a duty of candor. And that means if they know something's dodgy with their product, right? For example, if CSL know that there's anything wrong with their product, they have an obligation under law to tell you about it. Well, 30 years later, there's haemophiliacs are still waiting to hear from CSL and their duty of candor. And I'm telling you now, I just hope that your family is not left waiting decades to find out why one of your loved ones was killed by one of the CSL products.
That's right. And I think that, I mean, how many people were still alive, Charles, that you know of?
What well, that leads into the whole Red Cross side of the scandal. So what you've got is the contaminated blood scandal in total. We're talking about, well, with thousands and thousands have died. How many haemophiliacs do we have left who were infected from that period where the CSL knowingly kept on distributing tainted blood? We think that there's less than 200. Less than 200 in the country. But I actually suspected it's even less than that. But I don't know. But I'm worried because I haven't heard from quite a few people. I mean, we've had various stages of our campaign over the years. We've had to, take breaks over time as people got more ill. But we certainly the phone rings a lot less from victims. So there's been 1,750 haemophiliacs infected. And of that group, in my opinion, I believe there's less than 200 alive.
And you have no idea about the other people infected.
Well, of the transfusion side, of that side, there are that I know of, there are hundreds of people. But in terms of how many were infected, we still don't know.
No, you could never possibly know, could you? Really?
Well, the Red Cross won't tell us after all these years. We've begged with them. I've said to them for years. I've also said to them, look, could you please responsibly just tell anyone, say, who received a blood transfusion before 1995, not to, but just to see their GP and get tested for hepatitis C, because it was actually a risk. The Australian blood supply was unprotected from hepatitis C, really, in the 1980s, 1970s, 1960s, and yet it was happening all the time, each year. So we are talking about thousands of people out there who might still not know. Certainly hundreds for sure that won't, okay?
Or if they, just died of liver cancer and that's what was on the death certificate and no one would ever know that it was actually caused by Hep C, So.
Well done, Sophie. Well done, Sophie. You know what? I had a whole well done death certificate fraud or the way things get written up, a major issue in Australia. And I'll just say this right now. The reason that the Red Cross won't talk about numbers is because they know more. They know that there's far more. I've said that there were 20,000 blood transfusion victims in this country and the Red Cross never argued. And I suspect that the reason they never argued with me, even though that was based on experts' estimates, right? But they never argued with that. And I suspect they never argued with that was because I'd given them a discount, a macabre discount. So, we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to, because, if these guys keep getting away with killing Australians en masse, we're not going to have the safe, public health system that we need in times like this, okay? What's the best way to deal with road companies like CSL that just want to harm and kill children and get away with it to make money? How do you deal with companies like this? How do you deal with them? by supporting Infected Blood Australia, right? And our cause for a Royal Commission. And so if you go to infectedbloodaustralia.com, you'll see on that front page, people can just sign up to support us and get to the bottom of this. What did go wrong? Why was the blood supply allowed to be contaminated for decades? Why is it okay that CSL get to make $140 billion, but their victims, haemophiliacs, they don't get any financial assistance in Australia?
Yeah, no.
They get helped in the UK, they get helped in America, they get helped all around the world, but not here, not in Australia. Why is that? Because it will draw attention to CSL.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got a small population and they're a big company. And so, when the attention's on them, that's significant, isn't it?
There's something very spooky about CSL. I have to say, I used to, for many years, talk about the Red Cross. And that funny enough, people might find that odd to say that the Red Cross can be scary. Oh, they can.
People are just putting up the web address as well. Thank you, guys. Yep.
Yes, thank you very much. And please support us. It's a worthy cause, I can assure you.
There's lots of information on there and also lots of places you can where you can subscribe, but you can also sign up to support the Royal Commission. And like I said, there's a lot of information on there as well about what's gone on. Yeah.
There is, and you'll see some spooky stuff about the Red Cross. I say it's bizarre to say it's spooky, but you see, the thing is, who would have thought that there would have been spooky stuff about the Catholic Church? Well, now they're arguing. That's why I took this issue to the investigative journalists that exposed so much of so many failures in child sex abuse. The wonderful journalist, a wonderful person too, Joanne McCarthy. I took it because so many hallmarks of child sex abuse are here in the tainted blood scandal, except in this case, the Red Cross are in the role of the churches and the government's in the role of CSL. And that's the thing, by the way, the government was CSL.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're watching tonight, I imagine. They've probably got some of their private investigators.
Probably, yeah, more than likely.
I'll just say, could you do the right thing? Instead of actually surveilling people like myself, who I was infected as a child, by the way, instead of doing that, could you do...
that's what I was going to ask you. Tell us your story, Charles. What your story is.
Well, what'd you like to know?
How were you infected? What was the story?
Well, how did I bump into, Australia's biggest medical cover-up, okay, and Australia's deadliest medical cover-up?
Exactly.
By being a kid, I basically went into hospital. I'd been diagnosed with this crazy disease after accepting a pharmaceutical bloody treatment from a doctor, which I regret to this day. I walked into a GP's office. The GP said, "Oh, you've got some acne." And I said, "Oh, thanks." And he said, "I've got these tablets. It's some sort of antibiotic treatment." So I thought, "Oh, okay." So not knowing anything about health back then, I took them like a stupid child, and of course my bone marrow failed. And so as a result of that, I had the same disease that the boy in the bubble had, which is called severe aplastic anemia.
Yeah.
And while we were working out what to do about this bone marrow that wouldn't work, I required blood transfusions and platelet transfusions. And what happened was I received a contaminated platelet transfusion. And would you believe it, the actual platelet transfusion they gave me, it was past its use-by date. So it had no beneficial therapeutic benefit to me whatsoever, but it transferred virus. And, and I found, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And so that's how it happened. But just for your audience to know, how did I first really get involved with tainted blood was, well, that's 1988 when I'm a kid, right, getting this blood transfusion. But I've got something really creepy and scary to tell your audience. I had a feeling I was going to get it. And I had a feeling I was going to get it was because a kid that I went to school with, he was a haemophiliac, and he had actually received contaminated blood. He got into a hospital for some bruising, and the hospital had said, "Oh, you should take this treatment from CSL," and the treatment transferred HIV, and he developed AIDS. And what happened was he was treated so badly in the 1980s. They treated him so badly. They made an example out of him. I'm thinking, why won't the Red Cross help him? Why won't CSL, do anything to help this kid that they've destroyed his life? They made a point of not helping him, right? And so
were they trying to imply that he was a drug user or gay or something?
they were trying to, I think they were trying to infer that it wasn't them, that basically they might not have been, you know, that there could have been, some spectre of doubt.
Yeah,
or that
they were blaming him, blame the victim. You know,
basically schooling tactics for some, you know, playing hardball like you do in a tough medical case, you know, that you might see on TV. But the thing is, this is a kid I'm going to school with. He's a kid. He was 11 years of age. They've infected him for some bruising. He wouldn't have died given this new treatment by CSL. I mean, and so they're doing this terrible stuff, and I thought there's something wrong.
Bruising probably meant that he was slightly anemic or something, you know. It's like, bruising doesn't necessarily mean you're a haemophiliac, does it?
Well, that's the other thing. Some people that they thought had haemophilia at the time didn't have haemophilia, but I won't go off too much into that. But there was too much prescribing of blood. They were over-prescribing. Over-prescribing. After 1978, when CSL got this product from the POMs, when the POMs knew it was contaminated, they sent the garbage over here. CSL everyone's over-prescribing this stuff. Honestly, if you ever see documentaries about Colombia, you know, in the 1980s, you'll see it's synonymous with Coke. Well, if they ever do a documentary about Australia and our biggest business, it'll be synonymous with everyone prescribing blood and everyone getting rich off blood. So this kid gets given blood for some bruising. It didn't turn out well. He gets AIDS. And automatically you'd help a kid. And every Australian would. Every Australian would help that kid. But I thought, hold on, they're making an example of him. And that's when I knew something doesn't smell right, okay?
Yeah.
And there's something un-Australian going on. I knew that. There was something dodgy, okay? So that's happening in the mid-'80s. So by 1988, when I'm in there, I knew that the same people that did that to the kid I went to school with, when it's my turn, I'm looking going, well, if they'll do that to him, they'll do it to me.
Do it to me. Yep.
And I asked the questions, by the way, some of these haematologists that were involved. And by the way, they were British. Could you believe it? They were actually British as well. And I said to them, again, not even Australian. And I said to them, you know, is this okay? Is everything? Oh, not to worry. It's absolutely safe. Absolutely. And total assurances. And of course, it wasn't. And that's how I got started, by noticing the mistreatment, the maltreatment of a small boy. I knew that something was dodgy. And that was 1988. So here I am. And I'm still here ever since.
Thank God you're here, Charles.
I've aged. This is not CGI. This is legitimately nearly 50.
Well, thank you. You're obviously put here to bring this message to the Australian people. And you are a trooper. Like, I can't believe your strength in the face of adversity. You've had very little cracks of light over the last 25, 30 years.
Because of the cover-up.
Because of the cover-up.
Australia. Yeah, it's a massive cover-up. And we will get, just for anyone watching, and Sophie too, this is going to open up real soon.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Have you managed to get any of the independents interested at all?
What happens is, if anyone, every audience would like to see, I was thinking about doing some videos showing, what happens is politicians, we are lepers to politicians. I want to make that clear. They just don't reply.
No. Politicians are lepers.
Politicians are lepers.
Yeah.
No, I like lepers compared to politicians.
Yeah, that's not fair. Not fair.
I've got empathy for lepers. They've got a lot less gold on them, I'll tell you that much. And if they do wear gold, they've paid for it themselves. These, no, they just ignore us. No one wants to know it. But just so if anyone wants to know what's happening, the United Kingdom has gone through this exact same scandal. And why have they? Well, they're the architects of it. Australia took all of its sort of blood protocols and its specialists and the way it treats haemophiliacs and the way it uses blood transfusions from mother country, from the UK. So the British knew that their blood supply was really dodgy in 1974. And they knew that their haemophilia treatments were dodgy in 1974, right? So the British have currently got an inquiry going on right now, a legal inquiry, which is the biggest in British history. And it's exposing all of the fact that all of these specialists, a lot of these specialists knew that the cost of doing business with haemophilia was that you're going to transmit viruses. It's just that they didn't really tell the public that. And so what's happening is in Australia is CSL and the Red Cross are still playing that the whole thing was an accident, hoping the public hasn't heard about what's happening in the UK. So I'm
they're so dumb. They're so dumb, aren't they? It's just like they think that we're living in a bubble here in Australia and we're not hearing about what's going on overseas.
Well,
they're
hoping that
same thing with the COVID vaccine. It's like, we're not hearing anything about what's going on overseas.
Yeah,
nothing.
They are, and they're hoping that we can become a lot more like North Korea, so that dissidents like me, because I'm an unwitting dissident. And by the way, to those whoever might be watching from my opponents at the Red Cross, opponents to justice at CSL, I just want to say something to you. I was only a kid. I'm not actually out to do anything wrong to you or to cause any trouble. Just trying to get answers actually to what happened to this kid who went to school with and others. It's literally nothing more than that. And they perpetuate this whole thing by not giving those answers. Make a list. I challenge the Red Cross tonight, and please, if anyone watching, please just write to them, ask them, tell us how many tainted blood victims there are, how many people were infected from blood transfusion. Have you told everybody that's at risk that they should get tested?
No, they don't.
Over.
Yeah, they actually don't care. It's very clear they don't care. They actually don't care about humans at all. At all.
Caring is bad for business, but here's the deal. You don't get to call yourself a humanitarian agency. You don't get to have that Red Cross when you don't care. I'm sorry, it's just part of the formula. You are a fraud, Red Cross. We're onto you. Okay, it's not just this. We're onto them on the humanitarian front. We're onto them what they did. We've got friends who run fabulous groups for bushfire victims who were ripped off by this agency, the Red Cross, right? Okay, so people are onto them. And what we're saying is, if you want to work with big business, at least wear the wolf's clothing.
Yeah, just say who you are, and then people can make their own assessment.
And so we can have choice. I can have choice. I don't particularly want to give CSL billions of dollars so they can, make money out of dirty deeds,
Yeah, so many businesses are partnered with Australian Red Cross. Like the one that I used to work for is partnered with Australian Red Cross because they think it's a humanitarian agency,
Well,
and it's like
there's many businesses who are partnered with the Chinese. That doesn't make it right. This Red Cross is dodgy. They're as dodgy as, and by the way, if anyone, this is what I'll say to you right now, I challenge anyone from the Red Cross to debate me. Sophie, you can be the referee or the umpire if you be so. Come on, challenge me.
Maybe we should do a campaign to get somebody on.
I'd love to. I've tried for many years. We have, and I've on the radio. I think years ago there was a debate between myself and someone else, and I think the Today Show years ago, like 20 years ago, we were planning to have a debate with the Red Cross, and they didn't turn up on the day. So look, I mean, just come on and talk to me. Well, why are you so frightened? Tell us how many victims you've got. CSL, tell us this. In full fairness, if anything goes wrong with this new injection that you're putting into millions of Australians, will you tell them that something's gone wrong? Will you help them? Because you haven't done that with your other victims. You've basically left them up the river without a paddle. That's what you've done. You've destroyed thousands of families.
They've been indemnified. That's the thing with the COVID vaccine.
They've been dehumanized. They've taken the milk of kindness out of CSL, out of this company. I can't believe they're Australian. You know what I think? I was saying the other day about what a big export CSL have been to America, because it's all CSL up and down America, America's biggest blood plasma company. And they say what a great export. They're our worst export.
Yeah.
They're still covering up something that happened decades ago, and they still won't tell us the truth.
But that's the nature of the pharmaceutical beast, isn't it? It's not a humanitarian export. It's a money-making export.
Well, and I just say, if the Red Cross or CSL, let's just go back to this airline analogy, because this is what I'm worried about. So basically, we have to go on this flight, okay, and a flight to North Korea or wherever it is that they're taking us all. And the thing is, what they're doing is, in the past, I get to choose my airline. But now they're saying, now listen, the Red Cross is saying, roll up here, kicking me, give me a good kicking onto the plane, like this humanitarian agency have done with us tainted blood victims over the decades. They've given us a good kicking, I can tell you that much, with this cover-up. And they get you on the plane, and they say, guess what, guys, it's mandatory. You've got to fly on this plane. I go, but listen, 1,400 other passengers were killed by CSL, and the Red Cross have killed probably 100,000 of it. We don't know. They won't tell us. I don't want to get on that plane but we've got to get on that plane. I mean, and if we get on the plane, it's the same thing again. We'll get no answers. There'll be no help. There'll be no parachute. There's no nothing.
We're just not going to fly anymore, Charles. Okay, we're just not going to fly anymore.
Guess what? Now, I'm not religious Amish, but I have decided that, you know, the Amish, I think they stop technology at a certain point. And they also, by the way, that movie Witness, it's one of my favorite films. It reminds me of what happened to me. But the Amish, yeah, they stop at a certain point. I've decided, you know what? If it means avoiding any more CSL products, I'm going to give up flying. Hey, if it means avoiding any more CSL products, I'll give up driving. I'll give up riding a bike, because they deliver medicine.
I think a lot of people are in that, actually, at that place. They're basically saying it's not worth it. Just not worth it.
When CSL, when I say CSL deliver bad medicine, their lawyers right now would say, excuse me, we're going to wring that bastard's neck. Because what I mean is, when you lie, it doesn't matter. It's bad medicine. We can't have that in public health. You're still lying about what you've done with the haemophilia treatments, if you can call them treatments. You're still lying about that. Hey?
30 years ago. The ones that were done 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay, how would we feel if South Africa said, well, you know, apartheid's still happening today, turn a blind eye, Nelson Mandela was never president, you know, it wouldn't be cool, okay? But this is what's happened. This is Australia's apartheid, what they've done. This has been a hangover here for decades, and we won't address it because they've got all these billions, and because they're such a big company, and because people, dissidents like me, get kicked off of Facebook or whatever. And so we're intimidated. We're intimidated in Australia not to talk about this stuff, but we've got to, because now it doesn't affect just thousands of people, or it doesn't affect people with a condition that they might think's obscure, like perhaps haemophilia. People might not know what that condition is. Now it affects millions. This business of having a company that won't tell the truth. You've got to tell the truth, CSL, and to the Red Cross. You've got to stop lying. It's time to tell the truth.
Yeah. So how do you, I mean, I know there's the case that's going in the UK that's obviously going to blow the lid on some stuff in Australia as well, right? That will be kind of like a domino effect. But how do you see it playing out in Australia over the next 6 months?
Well, I think what will happen is, you know, I'll tell you what it's like. It's a bit like they know that something's coming over the horizon. I think the Red Cross are like hiding under the trenches and see us go quickly, you know, and they're just calculating the damage and all the rest of it. But they know that their private jets and their holiday homes will be unaffected. But I don't see them saying anything, and I don't see too much happening in the next 6 months, apart from some of our members dying if we don't get help. That's why I'm asking people to go to infectedbloodaustralia.com and support this push for a Royal Commission. So, because we need to get, for example, financial assistance. We've got victims who've actually lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, and they've got no resources at all, other than, you know, the smallest benefits that you have available, which are completely inappropriate for people who had jobs and families and all of that kind of stuff. So so in the next 6 months, what I see happening is I see the opposition to justice, CSL and the Red Cross, I see them doing very little, but I see us Australians doing quite a lot. And I'm very positive about that, because we've got this mass rollout now of yet more CSL products. And I think that more people will support our push for sort of decency in healthcare, where we sort of ask people, listen, if you're going to inject me.
Transparency and informed consent, really.
Yeah, and also, could they stop killing people too? How about that?
That'd be nice. Yeah, that'd be nice.
We're going to stop killing people in healthcare and try and preserve life. And so if you know that there's something wrong with your product, how about you don't put it in people?
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we going in the next 6 months? We're going to justice, we hope. So we're going to hope that this momentum that we've got right now, because we're building as a group, but we need more people. We need as many people as we can, because remember, by supporting us, you're going to make the Australian healthcare system much, much safer for all of us.
Yeah, call them to account, basically. And I think, you know, because of what's happening at the moment, there are more and more people who are inclined to look at what's happened in the past and look at what's happening now and say, this is not how the health system should be working, the public health system should be working in Australia. It needs, you know, like worldwide, right? It's worldwide. The whole system needs a complete rejig, right? To be focused on the individual and the human once again, and not this pharmaceutical health, but real health, you know, which is about what you eat and what you drink, and not shoving foreign toxins in your body and all that sort of stuff. So,
well, look at this. I mean, I've got a compromised immune system and have since, you know, taking a pharmaceutical product that destroyed my bone marrow, right? Look at this. I mean, I pop it all the time, vitamin C, all right? I've got some zinc.
Yep, zinc.
I've got them right here as I talk, because I am vitamin D, and I take this stuff all day long. And because I don't want to get sick, and I haven't for years, ever since I learned how to look after my immune system. So that's
right.
One way to rejig. The other thing I rejig, there's one thing, having fought public health tyranny for decades, there's one thing I've realised. We've got to start putting some people in jail, and we've got to put the right people in jail. I think it's time to start putting public health officials who are caught knowingly distributing contaminated anything to anybody to jail. And
or misinformation as well.
Well, misinformation that leads to harm. You know, for example, like misinforming parents that a product is 100% safe and that their child needs it, etc., knowing that that product would transfer harm. I think that sort of thing, we're going to have jail. Look, we expect that of ourselves, we expect that of our neighbours, but we're putting companies like CSL and the Red Cross on a pedestal. We're saying, listen, you know, you guys can go ahead, you've got a green light to do what the hell you want. Come to any school, come to any town, come to the whole of Australia, for God's sake, do what the hell you want. We've got to say no to that. That's the old way. We've got to have the new way, because, you know, why do we have cover-ups in healthcare? Because of this bullshit, because of these lying, and because we haven't put some guys in jail. Let's fix it.
Yeah,
so that's my...
No one's been the, you know, there's no deterrent. There is no deterrent. There hasn't been a deterrent for 40 to 50 years. You know, very rarely do heads of corporations go to jail. Very rarely.
Listen. If you, in any line of work, if you kill children, you're in bad shape. You're going to jail. Hey, you'll have a lynch mob anyway. Australians won't cop it. But in this great big ivory tower called CSL, they've killed more kids than anybody. And they did it knowingly in the 1980s. And guess what? All they did was got rich off it. We've got to say no to that, because this is why it's not a deterrent, it's an attractant. Don't you understand? These indemnities, what they basically say, hey, CSL, how do you feel about injecting millions of Australians, and how do you feel about yet more indemnities and yet more billions and another private jet? Yes, please. Of course they're going to say yes. We've got to stop that. We've got to say, how do you feel about never doing any of this bullshit ever again? Because and how do you feel about going to jail if you knowingly harm Australians?
Well, you know, we need to find some decent lawyers is what we need to find. Like the ones that prosecuted the James Hardy, you know, some decent negligence tort lawyers. Yeah.
Come and talk to us, infectedbloodaustralia.com. If we've got...
if you're a tort lawyer out there.
Yeah, we've got someone... Maybe you watch Boston Legal and you like the look of that. Well, come and see us. Yeah, because I tell you what, you'll never find a better case.
We just have a real lack of decent lawyers in this country. We really do. It's been made very apparent through this whole pandemic thing that it's very few lawyers who are prepared to stand up and put their head above the parapet, because they know what's going to happen to them, right?
We've got very few good journalists in this country. I mean, let me give you an example. You know, the
zero,
ABC,
almost. Yeah.
You know, the ABC, we've asked them again and again, would you have haemophiliacs on? Would you have... No. And one time we nearly got haemophiliac on, and they dropped him in at the last minute, and they replaced him with Jane Horton, who's talking about CSL. So if anyone's from the ABC...
Talk about adding injury to insult.
Oh, yeah, I know. Jane Horton instead of a haemophiliac. So it's like, yeah, that's right. She's probably watching tonight, or her goons will send this video. But please, ABC or any journalist, please could you write about Australia's deadliest medical scandal? And please could you write about how this company that had been indemnified to make this British-developed AstraZeneca vaccine have got history, and how they were indemnified once before, and they're indemnified for Australia's deadliest medical scandal, which was contaminated blood. Well, then I've enjoyed this interview. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been great, Charles. So just say again how people can help at the moment.
Yes, if you can get to infectedbloodaustralia.com And on that front page, we've got like this support form. So
yeah, it's a great website, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you can see, actually, we've got the great actor from Victoria, Carla Bonner there, who unfortunately lost her father to contaminated blood. So we've got some good people in our team, and we're all on the same page that we want to get this fixed. But by fixing this, by the way, by fixing contaminated blood, we feel that you'll help fix public healthcare in Australia.
So many things. So many things.
So many things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it will happen, though? Do you reckon it will happen, Sophie?
I'd like to have faith, Charles.
So do I. Well, let's hope so. I reckon with you letting me on your show here on the porch, I reckon it's done us a world of good anyway.
Well,
He's the one that caught it on the porch.
Yeah. No, I put it on the porch.
Oh, right.
Because when I was blocked off my Lord Shaftesbury, I did it on Lord Shaftesbury II, which used to be George Orwell. I caught it on the porch with Lord Shaftesbury, so that's where he got it from. Yeah, it's clever management.
Yeah.
On the porch, I actually like it. It's good. I've enjoyed this on the porch. We'll do it again.
Yeah, I like the porch too. It's just getting a little bit chilly. It's getting a little bit chilly for the porch now. It might have to be by the fire with Lord Shaftesbury.
Well, look, I've got to jump in. Hey, it's actually getting chilly down here in Sydney too. We've had it's just gone all of a sudden, it's getting cold.
Autumn, yeah.
All right, Sophie.
All right, lovely to talk, Charles, and we'll catch up soon. We'll follow up with you, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Cheers, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.